Hi, I'm Andre Calilhanna, blog editor and content manager for BookBaby, and I'm speaking with my friend Janna Lopez.
Hello. I am
Jan-
a creative writing coach and book guide. I work in Santa Fe, New Mexico. My business is called Land of Enchantment Writing.
And I've been to the Land of Enchantment for the writing retreat, and what a great time. Um, got a lot out of that. So that, I guess, is sort of prompted this, relationship and conversations that we've been having. And and Jan, I think it was probably your idea, but either way, we decided that like having some conversations related to editing and writing might benefit our readers. Certainly helps us sort of flesh out some of these ideas. And we wanted to share some of our insights and experiences with you guys. Um, so this should be a series. If all goes well, we're planning on doing a few of these. Um, and so this first one we were talking about, so we've broken it out into some different topics. And the first topic that we've got in mind was finding the right fit with an editor and a writer for the editor. So, one of the things that you wrote on here, Janna, was something about how to preserve a story's essence as an editor. And I was kind of curious as to what you were thinking of when you said the story's essence.
Yeah, and I just want to add before I jump into that, dovetailing on what you had described, it's interesting that we have the relationship that we have and the perspectives that we have because we are both writers and both editors, and we've worked with each other in both capacities. And I think that's what started this concept was that not all writers get a chance to talk to editors and not all editors get a chance to talk to writers to the degree that we have. And we've had a lot of conversations related to how that's a unique relationship unto itself. And so to that end, we have had conversations, and me as your writer that you have edited and me as a guide helping you with your writing, how do we talk about preserving a story's essence? Because that is what all writers hope for when they look for an editor. And at the same time, editors, if they are a good fit, are truly looking to try to preserve a writer's essence. So let's talk about defining what story's essence is. And you can describe that as a writer and what you see as an editor.
Well, yeah, and I guess the hang up I have, I guess, is on the word essence as opposed to voice, because that to me, certainly from the editor perspective, go from there. Um, I find that like what I'm really trying to keep in mind as I'm editing somebody's work is that I'm not injecting my own voice or introducing my own voice into the work. It's really about preserving the writer voice. Um, so when that's where I don't know if I'm just parsing words or if this is a case of semantics, but that was where I was trying to get the definition between essence of the story, because to me the essence of the story is what the story is about, and the voice of the story is how the author's words and how the author's voice comes through in the writing. So I was trying to figure out if there was really a distinction there or if we were actually talking about the same thing, just using different words.
And I love that question. To me, voice is maybe how the writer goes about trying to express what they're saying. And essence might be the outcome or feeling or intention of what they want the story to convey when they're done. So maybe the essence is the what and the voice is how. Maybe that's how I see it as a writer and as an editor. When I'm looking at people's work and I'm editing people's work, I'm looking at how they're telling their story and what the story is being, what the story is telling itself. So I kind of look at them as very closely related, but different when I'm in an editing role.
It's interesting because the second point that we had on our cheat sheet here was about, or at least something was thinking about in relation to this conversation, was how different projects have a different essence and a different voice, really. So, when I'm editing a piece for the blog, there's a certain, tone that we're trying to enact with BookBaby and the blog. and that's a much different thing than when I'm editing somebody's book. I have to really stay much more true. The author can go in all sorts of different directions. I mean, I'm thinking of like, writers like William Burroughs, or I don't know, Charles Dickens. Like the way they use language, you can't approach that as like a one size fits all. Like they've got a very, different authors have very, very distinct voices. So when I'm working with a blog post, I'm trying to basically really sort of pare it down so we're really getting to the core of what the message is in a pretty concise way, and in a tone that sort of is in keeping with what we've established as sort of our tone as the BookBaby blog. But an author's book is going to be able to go into all sorts of different directions, and you don't want to trample on the essence of the story. Obviously, the essence has got to come through, because if you're confusing the story with your language, then we've got a problem.
Yeah, and I would say as a BookBaby author, because
Mhm.
I've also been on that side of things, if I wanted to give advice to prospective BookBaby authors or current BookBaby authors who are trying to find an editor and wonder about this mystery and process of how we go about deciding, I think having clear intentions about how you're going to tell your story and being true to that and seeing that through, like that would be the advice I would give a BookBaby author about, because editors can pick up on those intentions, right? We can pick up on those things when we're reading the work, and we appreciate your unique voice and your unique point of view. And there's nothing wrong with that if it's your book, right? So we also know that if the writing is going for a specific intention, then that's something to be considered. So as a writer, I know the BookBaby blog has a tone, and I try to write to the tone of what I understand. One of the best pieces of advice I've been given is, when you know you're going to write for something specific, check out other things that have been written in that place, and get a sense of what it is they're trying to create as far as the sound of tone or voice in their authors.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so it's funny, we're already really straddling the difference between, it's not exactly for hire necessarily, but it's for a specific purpose, back to our writing with a purpose, as opposed to your book, where, you've got a lot more leeway in terms of, expressing yourself through your words.
Especially with self-publishing,
Yeah,
I mean, that is a very important distinction, is when you are self-publishing through a place like BookBaby, you have total freedom to express your story in the ways that you want. And that is a luxury, in my opinion. That's an asset of why I chose to self-publish 2 books with BookBaby. And now I'm going to be doing my 3rd and 4th book. But self-publishing means you do have that freedom.
sure. I mean, clearly at the same time, you don't want to confuse your audience by going in strange circles, and you still need to be able to write and tell your story. But
Now, I'm assuming we're talking to all amazing, educated, interested, creative, brilliant writers aspiring to have a book published. That's
right.
my assumption.
Yeah, it's funny. There's certain conventions that I think you need to conform to, and then clearly you've also got a ton of leeway to be able to spread your wings and express yourself at the same time. Um, and it's interesting. I don't know if this is going on a tangent of my own here, but there's also the distinction between writing, or editing a book of poetry, which we've also experienced together, versus a story, a book of prose, as opposed to back to the blog or something like that. So it's definitely, there's every type, every genre of book is going to have its own parameters, and its own ability to be able to sort of break and bend and make your own rules as you go along. And certainly poetry is different than prose.
One thing I appreciated about you as an editor, and I would encourage all writers out there to take this into consideration, is definitely trying to find a good fit. And I'm sure we're going to talk more about what that means in future conversations. But for now, I will say that Andre, as an editor, suggested that I send him a few pages, and then he went ahead and did his version of editing, how he would approach it, and sent it back to me. And that gave me a good indicator of how he would approach editing my poetry book, because I do know, to Andre's point, that poetry is very different than prose or memoir or short fiction. So one way as a writer to give you a good tip, if you're going to work with an editor, see if they're willing to edit a few pages and see what they send back. You will know if, just by that handling of your work and your words, if that editor may or may not be a good fit. That could be a good indication to start with.
Yeah, and that's why I established that as my sort of protocol with writers, because trying to explain what you're going to do, it's, if I remember somebody making the analogy, it's like, like dancing about cooking, you know what I mean? Like I can try to tell you what it's going to be like, but there's no way for me. And until I've got my, hands on the work and I'm sort of steeped in the writing, I'm not really sure what, the edited piece is going to differ from the original to begin with. So this gives me, I think, a chance to really sort of, get into what the project's going to be, set my expectations in terms of how much time it's going to take, and what this project is. And at the same time, then it's like I'm delivering to the writer, this is what you're going to get, here's exactly what you're going to see at the end of this project. And I couldn't think of a clearer way of being able to communicate that to the writer. And, from that point in time, they can say, yeah, this is great. Like, you're really hitting all the right notes, or you have no idea what you're doing. I don't want to have anything to do with you. It's been great. I think it's been a very effective way to communicate what the process is. And, particularly for like a new author who's never gone through this before, I think it also really sort of gives them a very concrete idea of what this process is going to look like and what they can expect.
And I think writers, writers rightfully so are trepidatious about working with an editor. I think writers don't know what to expect the editing process is going to look like. I think some writers don't really understand the navigation and negotiation process that editing actually entails, because it is a give and take. And we as editors are trying to make decisions on your behalf in your best interest to actually polish and highlight and bring out the strengths of what it is that we're reading. And so we're making those decisions on your behalf. And so I would recommend to writers to understand that just as writing your work was a process for us as editors, it's a process. And we're taking our time to get a sense of the book's strengths and opportunities to maybe take a few things out so that the stronger points can shine, and understand that there is flexibility that is required. So be patient with the editors at the same time as you learn how they're going about being with your work and addressing your work.
Like you said, it's a process, this whole writing, especially a book, clearly it's a big project. So there's a lot of phases to the process.
Well, I think this has been a great conversation. So let's maybe just take a minute to recap the main points of what we wanted to get out of today's conversation. And for people that, are just coming to us and wanting to start the process of learning about writing and editing as a symbiotic relationship, we recognize that it is a symbiotic relationship, that there are different kinds of editing. Writers would benefit from having an understanding of the different kinds of editing, and that it is as much of a process for the editor as it is for you and me as writers. and understanding the editor. And the suggestion of maybe sending a few sample pages to see if you're a good fit with an editor is an amazing way to go about starting a relationship that's going to be a pretty important relationship as they go through your work. I know that when I work with writers as an editor, it's a very interesting, close relationship. I feel like I'm stepping into the writer's world of their work that they've made so much time and effort to create. So it's important to me to get it right.
It's an honor, I mean, and it's, again, this is also where, as an editor, you don't want to consider yourself like part of the artistry, like you're not the artist in this situation, the writer is. But you're the engineer. If I'm going to take like a musical reference, like you're really trying to take this work and put it in its best light, and really make sure that the essence of the story is really coming through clearly and in the voice of the author.
Any other recaps, highlights that you took from our conversation?
I think that pretty much did it, actually. I guess I'll know when I transcribe our conversation and I edit it down.
Well, I think it's great that writers are out there seeking how to present their best work, and BookBaby has amazing resources. And I'm not saying this, for any other reason. As being an author who has struggled and didn't know where to start, BookBaby's blog was a place I started and got a lot of information and guidance on how to make sense of this overwhelming process so that I could concentrate on actually writing the book, and I think that's important.
Well, that's very gratifying to hear too, because that's precisely what we're trying to do with the BookBaby blog, is present information to help independent authors, make their way through this, navigate this whole journey of publishing and writing. And like we said, there's so many different phases and so many different things, and it can be overwhelming. So I do think we do our best to try to break it down into bite-sized, digestible, understandable chunks so that you can learn a little bit and do your best work.
Mission accomplished.
We're still working on it. All right, well, Janna, thanks so much. This has been great. I'm looking forward to picking this up and doing it again. Maybe I'll have my mustache back.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been great. I always love talking, and I do appreciate that we've had this very interesting relationship as writer and editor, both in each role, and that we have a chance to share some of that insight for others.
Agreed. All right, well, till next time. See you soon.